Welcome to Zestful Aging, where I interview inspiring, fascinating women who are navigating aging with class and sass. I'm your host, Nicole Christina. Hey everyone, I am so grateful for all of the downloads, and I'd love a rating on iTunes and a comment. And please subscribe. It helps the show's rating so other people can find it and learn how to age well. And if you are loving the podcast, why not check out the companion online course, Zestful Aging, Simple and Sustainable Habits for Health and Longevity. You can access it through my website, NicoleChristina.com/Zestful Aging. It's based on the Harvard study of adult development, and I'm really proud of how it's turned out. Well, I've got my coffee in my hand and my trusty dog Sparky beside me, so let's begin. Today on our show, we have Julie Dillon, who is a nutrition therapist on a mission. Her focus is on her clients' relationship with food and helping them build a new, more intuitive, positive approach to eating. A passionate proponent of the non-diet movement, Julie teaches people to be more mindful, intuitive, and joyful around eating. In response to her clients' fears that without a diet they'll be giving up, she responds, "It's not letting yourself go, it's letting yourself be." Julie blogs, podcasts, and presents widely on the subject of intuitive eating. Welcome, Julie.
Well, thank you, Nicole. It's so great to be here, and I love having this opportunity to chat with you.
That's great. And, I just want to start, I understand that you're one of the few women in the universe who has not been on a diet. And I just love for our listeners to hear the story of, your training and how you started on this mission.
Mm-hmm. So I would love to share the story. It's definitely a twisted, bumpy kind of journey that I've been on, and I appreciate there's so many dietitians. I'm trained as a registered dietitian who have a similar kind of experience, and like you said, I've never been on a diet, and part of my experience as a dietitian has been eye-opening because I appreciate now why I've never been on a diet. I've come from a family that's really always been in a thin body. It's just genetically how we're kind of designed, I guess. And if you line up all the Duffy's my maiden name, if you line them all up, you would see people who look like me in a smaller body. So I have always walked this earth with lots of thin privilege. And so I was never really pushed into dieting. I certainly experienced diet culture and, living in a world where femaleness is, we're supposed to be compliant and following rules about food and exercise that I didn't, but I really rejected those. And I think I had an easier time because I looked appropriate, for some people. But when I was looking at what I wanted to do as a grown-up, I found nutrition just by kind of accident. And I kind of just went with it because I like science and psychology, and I actually really wanted to be a therapist more than anything, but I was discouraged from doing that. But I eventually ended up doing that anyway. But so when I was in school, the way dietitians are conventionally trained is a medical model, and it's most of us have a minor in chemistry or some kind of science. We basically are all the same clients or same classes rather as med students, and we're just trained in the medical model. And after I was done with that training, we all have to do this like really challenging competitive year. It's kind of like a residency where we call it a dietetic internship. And only half of people who have a degree in nutrition get a placement. So there's half of these almost dietitians out there that never got to finish their degree because there's not enough placements. So when I was in that, I really started to appreciate the hospital setting and how that medical model was evolving to support people who were already appearing compliant. People who are in thinner bodies like myself. And I was starting to notice the fat phobia in hospitals. And I thought there was something about it that just felt like it tugged at my like integrity, like that wasn't right. And, I found so many people that I was working with, and early on in my career, I specialized in working with children of higher weight and their families. And what I noticed is so many of these families were eating in a way that was quote unquote good, yet they were living in this higher weight. So there was lots of assumptions that they were either lying or they weren't trying hard enough. And it didn't take too long to appreciate that I wasn't really well equipped to do my job. And so that's when I sought out training as a counselor. So I have a master's in mental health counseling, and it basically just helped me to get a bigger picture. But I really still thought at that point that I needed to fix people, and part of that fixing was helping people lose weight. Like that would, because I was like, well, I'm not helping people lose weight, so obviously I'm not doing it right. And I wasn't doing it right, but I was looking for the wrong option because I wanted people to be healthier. But it took me a really long time to appreciate that weight loss is not a behavior. It's just like it may or may not happen. And when you make it like the thing to shoot for, I feel like we lose health, because then healthy behaviors of like moving in a way that feels good and is sustainable, enjoyable, and maybe challenging, well, that doesn't become the important part. It's like, I need to make sure I exercise a certain amount to burn off XYZ. And then, as I was doing this work early on, I was also starting to specialize in eating disorders. And I'm like, wow, diet culture sure sounds a lot like anorexia. And so why are my clients with anorexia like hugged and given sympathy, but my clients at higher weights are told to practice anorexia harder? And that's really what pushed me to that mission you were talking about, because that really didn't sit well with me. I can remember for a good 6 months not getting good sleep because I was teaching diet culture to people at higher weights, prepping people for gastric bypass, and then working with clients the next hour where I was saying, trust your body. All foods are good foods, and I'm like, I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here. This is not good. But, as a dietitian, many of us are, even if we come to that conclusion, many of us still have to practice to help people lose weight. And that's basically what my boss said is, if you want to, that's fine and dandy that you have this belief, but if you want this job, you have to keep doing what you're doing. So,
which sounded like a setup. You were saying that, you had people in higher weights and you were giving them, I'm guessing, diets, and it wasn't working.
Yeah. And I feel like what was happening, and this was back in 2004, so a number of years ago now, but at the time I think we were, as a culture and medical and healthcare, we just thought we had to try harder. So I'm not going to name any products, but I was pushing like liquid diets and stuff like that. It was really, really problematic behavior that I was pushing, and pathological. Certainly, if I saw someone at a weight that was considered more appropriate doing that, I would have taken them right to the hospital. But I was encouraging my higher weight clients to be tortured by that. And, for anyone listening, I don't know if I feel like a lot of people don't really consider it in that way. And because higher weight is considered such a horrible thing, but it's really torture to do that to your body. And it can, basically we know from research that restricting nutrients like calories, carbohydrates, fats, like restricting any of those promotes the brain to get so preoccupied and feel like it has obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety disorder. Like literally some people in research would hallucinate when they would be restricted, and
certainly dream about food too.
Dream about food. Yes, sleep gets disturbed. And what we've been able to put together, because we can't replicate that research anymore, it's so unethical, but like what we've been able to put together is that that's the body's way of saving itself. Of course, when your body thinks you're on a deserted island somewhere without food, and you see some food, it's gonna like say, eat all you can and don't stop, because you don't know when you're gonna get it again. And don't go to sleep because I need you to think about food. Go look for some food. And for so many people at higher weights, that's they think it's because they do have like low willpower or a character flaw. And what I always end up feeling like I need to convey to anyone listening who is in that place is like, you're not lacking willpower or have a character flaw. You're just being a successful human. You know, like that's just how we're wired to stay alive. And so that's kind of what brought me to, and that is like a super Cliff Notes version, but like that's what brought me to really rejecting diets. And my life experience is different than people at higher weights for sure, because I've never felt that kind of pressure. But I really am trying to be an ally as much as possible to help the medical community to appreciate that experience. And I don't know, just really listen more to where people are. And so many people are already eating quote unquote healthy, doing everything they're supposed to do and moving their body. And they just think they're not doing it well enough because they're not small enough yet. And that's where I feel like we're getting it wrong.
Can you and I think about these topics a lot, but I don't know if our listeners have an appreciation of what thin privilege means. Can you talk just a bit about what that term means?
Well, it's something that for me personally is acknowledging that, when I go to the doctor for like strep throat or my knee hurts, that I'm going to be listened to, that I'm going to be given a range of recommendations, and my weight's not going to be the blame. And also I can walk through any store and find clothes that fit me. I can go to any restaurant and I never ever have to think about if a chair is going to be comfortable or not. I can go to a class and go to college or grad school or go to any lecture and not have to worry about the chairs. So many people have been so open with their time and patience to explain to me how hard that is. And I've gotten to know a number of nutrition and counseling students at higher weights, and they talk about how much time it takes for them the weeks before school starts every semester. They have to go look at every classroom they're going to be in and see if they're going to fit in the chairs and whether or not they need to try to figure out something else. And, classrooms change as semester gets closer, right? And so when that happens last minute, that really sends them through a loop. And again, like the restaurant thing, going to a restaurant and not having to think about it. But then actually when a person's at the restaurant, I can order anything and nobody's really going to bat an eye. I can remember when I appreciated this part of my privilege. I was speaking with a client of mine, and she was saying that she wanted, and this was so long ago, gosh, it was like 15 years ago. And I'm so appreciative because she always is like, you can tell anybody the story you want. But she was like talking about how she really wanted to order a hamburger and fries for lunch and with a group of like colleagues. And I said, I just had that for lunch. It's okay for you to eat that. And I was trying to say, as a dietitian, I want you to have permission. And she said, Julie, do you know how different it is for you to order a hamburger and fries and me? And she identified as fat. And she's like, as a fat woman, to order a hamburger and fries is so different. And
the judgment
that comes with it. And, she's expected to, she basically has to eat for show, and that's something Evelyn Tripoli taught me, that kind of vernacular. When you're living in a higher weight, you have to eat for show in order to show people that you're trying to be smaller, because there's nothing worse in this world than a person in a higher weight who's not trying to lose weight. Like that's the ultimate radical rebellion, right? But yeah, so that's just a little smidge of thin privilege. It's I think I can walk through life and there's so many things that I don't have to think about. And I'm a mother of two and I'm almost 43. So something that I'm starting to appreciate is that having time to not think is one of the greatest things in life. So like whenever my brain is on all the time, I get so exhausted. And so I try to put myself in someone's shoes who's having to always think about those things. And that is stressful. And I often hear people talk about it as a death by thousands of paper cuts. It's like
Mm.
these tiny little insults all the time that add up to being torture, like pure
Mm.
torture. So,
Hmm. You have such deep compassion for people who experience weight stigma every day.
well, I'm glad that it comes through that way. I feel like I'm still learning. So, I
Mm-hmm.
probably will have some moments next week where I'll learn some new things that wasn't even on my radar. Like
Mm.
one thing that I learned recently um, was I was speaking, and this is the person I also asked for permission to share this because I just thought this was so mind blowing from like an employment perspective. Is she's in a higher weight and looking for a job in a medical type setting. And whenever you work in a medical setting, you have to do a drug test, and you have to. This may be kind of crass, but you have to go pee in a toilet, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to do it with the door open, and you have to hold this little teeny tiny cup under you and pee in the toilet. And her body was not able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's literally took hours to figure out a
Oh
solution.
my gosh.
And
That
she
sounds
almost
so
left.
humiliating.
So humiliating. And so and she said, this is something before a job interview I think about for days and days and days.
Mm-hmm.
And of course some places have a solution, like they have a little system where you can hold the cup on this longer stick, and
Okay.
or you can hook it to the toilet, but they didn't have that. And so she almost left. And so then she went and gotten this job, would have been able to advance her career. She's a brilliant woman. Brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And what a sad thing for us to not have her, you know, be able to provide her voice. And so yeah, anyone who's listening who maybe is in a similar body size as me, I think it's important to acknowledge that. And so whenever we make comments about our body, um, that in some ways really just kind of normal, sadly, about like disparaging comments like, oh, I hate my butt, or I need to lose some weight, or I'm too fat,
Mm-hmm.
how that's another paper cut to someone in a higher weight, or someone
Mm-hmm.
in a higher weight than you, or someone who thinks they're in a too high of a weight, how that's contributing to this harm. And the thing that makes me all riled up about it, and why I focus so much on really appreciating how my privilege is in the small body, is that we know contributing to more of that just makes triglycerides go higher, makes insulin
Right.
higher, cholesterol
Right.
higher, inflammation worse. And so the very health problems that we blame on higher weight could really be explained by the oppression of living in a higher weight.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and usually people don't just have like one type of marginalization. People, maybe a person of color or gender nonconforming and in a higher weight. So there's other aggressions going against them. So
Mm-hmm.
it's really opened my eyes. And I know, Nicole, you're trained as a therapist, and so things like that are probably in your curriculum. But like as a dietitian, that's just not something we're taught. I had to
Mm-hmm.
kind of learn it the hard way.
Yeah, I mean, you're taking topics right out of the social work curriculum,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, but we still live in the world we live in, and we're still surrounded by this, fat phobia and weight stigma. One thing I wonder about being doing what you do and caring so deeply about it and probably seeing it almost everywhere is, how do you deal with your own exhaustion of, I think of it like, you remember Sisyphus, the Greek character who would roll the boulder up and then it'd roll down, roll the boulder up and roll down. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
how do you deal with your own exhaustion about fighting a system that is all about making people feel like they've had a personal failing,
Mm-hmm.
because they're not in a body that is idealized.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I feel like that's something that I am been really focusing on in the last few years. Um, People who know me pretty well know that I was like feeling like almost like a burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I've really tried to do, and I'm also a mom and a primary caregiver, so part of the burnout was just like I'm exhausted.
Right.
And so what I've become really good at is saying no, and boundaries. And people may consider the boundaries to be too anal retentive, but you know what? Um, I really find my strength is meeting with people one on one, and I want them to feel safe with me, and then I want them to find ways to replicate that experience in their life. And so I'm trying just to focus on that, just this is the place where I am able to make change, and then raising my own children to be more accepting of diverse bodies walking this earth, and if anything, I want them to see the beauty in that. And so I have given myself permission to not always fight. I do feel guilt for that though, because I'm like, oh my gosh, like it's so easy for me to just check out. I don't have to live with it, but I also try really hard, and I also do lots of therapy. So like, I feel like my therapy is one of the things that I can't let go, because it's where I can, discuss all of that confusion and compassion fatigue and stuff like that. So
yeah, I mean, you could spend every waking moment fighting this fight.
And I think some people do. And for me personally, this may be too much information, but like, I'm just not someone that can work all the time. I'm just, I end up being, I call myself an extroverted introvert. So I get drained really easily. Like physically, my body just shuts down. So if I'm going to do any of it, I have to be protective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds like good advice. Hello, Zestful Agers. First, I want to thank you so much for your enthusiasm and interest in the podcast. Words cannot really describe how fun it is to make this for you. We are now in the tens of thousands of downloads, and Zestful Aging is still very young. We've heard from inspiring women from all over the world, and I hope it has made your life richer and helped you be more zestful as you navigate aging. In addition to being fun, making a weekly podcast is a surprising amount of work. So I want to encourage you to become a patron today. It's the way I can continue bringing you in-depth, thought-provoking interviews without sponsorship, aka commercials. And I've added a special free gift just for being a listener to the podcast. It's called My Best Ever Self-Care Manual. And again, it's based on research and my 25 years experience as a psychotherapist. So hop on over to patreon.com/zestfulaging and download the free manual. And while you're there, donate what you might pay for your cup of coffee today. It will make you feel good. I promise. So, as you know, this podcast really is geared towards women who are middle-aged and over. And I wanted to ask you how you might help a woman who comes to see you who is, let's say, an empty nester, let's say, really in a place of recreation, like, okay, my old life is not here anymore. My kids are grown. They may or may not be back and forth, maybe reassessing my marriage, maybe thinking about retirement. When they come to see you, do you see that their challenges are different than the younger clients you see, or how does that work? What do they talk about with you as older women?
So I really was looking forward to midlife myself, because I thought it would mean that it wouldn't be as much focus on appearance or keeping up with the Joneses. And, I said earlier, I'm 43. I think the technical midlife age is very young, 45, right? But I'm like, what I'm gathering from research and talking to people identifying with being in midlife is that no, it's not, you don't get this break or this respite culturally. And what I'm noticing is these really typical life transitions that you talk about, like the empty nest, relationship changes, aging parents passing away, changing jobs, retirement, like all those really normal, expected transitions in midlife, where there's obviously going to be grief and challenges, and where someone, again, I feel like it's obvious, is going to need support. These are hard things, hard changes. Oh, and excuse me on that. So these are going to be very hard changes. And what I see happening instead is this message culturally that if your husband's going to leave you, well, go to the gym. If you're trying to get a promotion, get a facelift. Like, instead of going for support, which is what emotionally and physically people in midlife naturally are going to need and crave and benefit from, they're putting it on their body. And I think it's because in midlife, we're expected that if we want to continue to be seen and heard, we need to look young and thin. There's still that pressure. And I'm sad to admit, but I remember watching a Real Housewives of some city on Bravo a couple of years ago, and one of them was going through menopause, and she was talking about basically that, I am not going to let myself go. There was that feeling that my body is changing, and I need to stay young and beautiful if I want to keep my husband, if I want to stay relevant. And so I'm going to fight it tooth and nail. And what a sad existence, as like biologically we have to fight aging. We have to fight the very processes that help with the aging process, because we're not supposed to look different. And I know menopause in particular is something that is connected to a typical weight change of about 15 pounds. That's like just a typical average. Many people it's more, but that's a really common amount that is cited in research.
To gain weight post-menopause?
Or around menopause and after. And I think it was like the 2 to 3 years within menopause, somehow. And that's a really typical amount. And what we've been able to connect is how adding that fat stores helps release extra estrogen as it's waning in the body because ovulation is going away. And having that extra fat stores helps with the symptoms of estrogen leaving. And so like the very thing that our body is like intuitively preparing for to help us deal with hot flashes and whatever else comes with menopause. And it's like they're fighting it. And so no wonder women during menopause are so miserable, because they're not allowed to just let their body be and do what it's supposed to do. And I know people point to, there's like a negative health effect of central weight gain. And sometimes things are both. Sometimes increased adipose cells is connected to like inflammation or something like that. And it also is protective. And I think that's hard sometimes in medicine to appreciate, that it's not either or. Sometimes it's both. And for what I see with women who come to see me, I'm someone that really has marketed myself as someone who I can help someone who's trying to no longer have a disordered relationship with food. So people come to see me, they already are seeing some disorder and they're wanting to eat normally again. They don't want to be focusing on diet culture. And what I see happening is like fighting that, whatever comes from fighting that fat and in the central adiposity during menopause, it ends up harming health more than anything, because people are isolating themselves, they're limiting whole food groups, they're exercising to the point that it's causing more problems. They're getting injured, and of course, negative body image out the yin yang. So, so it ends up being more harmful. So I'm a big proponent in like our body is pretty spectacular, and that it has a way to survive. And again, I have lots of privilege because I've never had a body that was considered unacceptable, but I also believe this for people of any size, that our body knows what it needs, and the more we don't mess with it, the healthier we are.
That must be really shocking news to some of your clients. I suspect that sitting with you, it might be the first time they've felt any kind of body acceptance, or even the beginning that, wait a minute, you're telling me I'm okay?
Hmm.
This is radical.
Yeah, I do call it that. I'm like, I know this sounds a bit radical.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever I lecture on it, like college settings or something, that's exactly what I call it too. I'm like, I know this is conflicting with everything you've learned so far, and it's going
Mm-hmm.
to make you uncomfortable, and that's okay. That's my intention. But for someone in my office, usually what I get is, Julie, this is the first time I felt safe with a healthcare provider,
Uh,
and people what we know with healthcare is when people don't connect with a dietitian or a doctor or any kind of healthcare, that for years and years, that's not a good thing.
right.
And providing what we call like weight inclusive care, um, people come back. They make sure that they're connecting because they feel like they belong, and that's, I feel like I wish every medical or healthcare provider had that as their foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And then once that foundation is laid and we know that the person feels safe there, then you can like work on interventions or whatever you want to do. But I feel like that needs to be the first and foremost. And yeah, you're right. Like there's people definitely that's really normal, for a few months just to grapple with that idea and to let that sink in. And man, it's so great when I can tell when people are getting to a place where they're realizing that they don't need to be fixed, that the
Mm-hmm.
world needs to be fixed. Often people come in, excuse me, they come in a place of like total anger. And
Mm-hmm.
I I probably sound sick and twisted, but I love when that happens
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, they're not, a person's not putting it inside,
Mm.
they're not putting it on
Right.
themselves, they're putting it where it needs to go. And yeah, they're pissed off. They're like, I
Yeah.
wasted my life
Right.
thinking I needed to do this in order to be worthy, and I've been worthy all along. And
Yeah.
that's where
What
like a community,
transformation.
yes, yeah, I'm like, that's, the anger doesn't last forever, but it's a really important time.
Are there particular books or podcasts or other resources that you offer people in this part of their process?
So in I live in central North Carolina. It's a pretty small town, and what I encourage people to do is connect with as many people as possible that have a similar outlook. I have a handful of therapists and doctors that I refer people to. What I want them to do is start to build a community, and thankfully we have podcasts and online support that provides that voice. I really am enjoying a podcast called She's All Fat. It's a
Mm.
fabulous one,
Hmm.
and especially for people who are um, newer to body positivity, I guess you could say, or wanting to just hear what normal life is like for people who have radically stepped into self acceptance and they're at
Mm-hmm.
a higher weight. I really like that one. And so connecting with just voices, I think, is really important. And finding online communities again. There's a couple conferences that usually I feel like as healthcare providers we know about, Nicole, like the Binge Eating Disorder Association
Mm-hmm.
or ASDA, the Association for Size, Diversity, and Health. Those are two conferences that are national most years, and they're open to professionals, but they're also open to anyone. And so for a lot of clients that I know, they'll go to those and they'll connect to people who look like them, and I don't know, get more support. Like I really want people to have a community then to
Mm-hmm.
kind of cling on to,
Yeah,
that.
absolutely. And you also have a specialty in PCOS.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, that this is a population of people that diet culture really has trampled over because polycystic ovarian syndrome, if any listener is not really aware of what it is, it's um, a condition affecting women or anyone with an ovary, or two, and that has some hormonal dysregulation. And what ends up occurring is there's like this genetic slash environmental kind of occurrence. We're kind of murky on the details because there's very little research into PCOS. I feel like it's starting to pick up, but at least 1 in 10 women have it. Some people are saying 1 in 7 now. And for the amount of research we have on it is really, really pathetic. But anyway, over time, there's this hormonal imbalance, and there's high circulating testosterone and other androgens. So women have facial hair, may have male pattern baldness, extra hair in places they don't want it.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's usually a difference or some kind of abnormality with menstruation. So many people struggle with infertility. It's the number one cause of ovulatory infertility. And so there's like a my body doesn't work kind of thing, and it's growing all this hair and central adiposity, or like more weight gain in the stomach. It doesn't happen for everyone, but for a good portion of people with PCOS, they experience this. And so what unfortunately what people are told is that weight gain caused the PCOS, which is totally wrong. There's people walking around with PCOS who are not in a larger body, so how can weight gain cause it?
Right.
But they're basically told, until I won't give you fertility treatment until you lose X amount of weight. Or, the only way to treat this is through diet and exercise. And I started to specialize in PCOS, not because I was excited to treat another medical condition, because I wasn't. I'm really a food behavior person. And so many of my clients who are at higher weights and in the throes of anorexia had PCOS. Like, they were eating so low amount of food.
Yeah.
And they were literally being tortured. And their docs were like, well, you're just not trying hard enough. Just eat less. I'm like, they're eating so little calories. Like, they will, no, this is not good. And so I feel like they're a group of people that experience tons of weight discrimination in the medical setting. And there's like this feeling of not feeling like a woman because of the hair differences and
double stigma.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I have a PCOS and food peace group. That's what I call it, on Facebook. That's free. That anybody with PCOS who's willing to not talk about diets is always free to join. But one thing I asked yesterday actually was like, what's the one thing you wish any of your healthcare providers knew about PCOS? And so much of it was like, I just wish you would ask me actually how I'm eating instead of assuming that I'm eating too much. Or I wish you didn't just talk about my weight. I wish you actually gave me information.
Oh, wow.
And lots of shame and stuff associated with that. And I think as a dietitian, I know like fear-based practices and shame-based practices are often like the first tools we reach for. And it stinks because shame like based treatment has been associated with poor health for a long time in research. Like, we already know it doesn't work, and it just makes people sicker. So,
if all this stuff worked, we'd be in very different position right now as a culture.
Sure. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Wow. Is there anything you'd like to say sort of as we wrap up? Any small steps that people can try if they want to sort of put their toe into this new world of food peace, and they've been chronic dieters and they know that diets don't work, but they don't know what else to try. Yeah. What are the really first small steps for people curious about this radical kind of process that you describe?
I feel like it's important to really give yourself a lot of compassion in that place. And one of the best, I don't know, not necessarily best, but like one of the first things I want people to know is that they don't need to be fixed. And the trying to fix is probably harming your health more than anything. Mm-hmm. And that you can trust your body. And it's okay if you don't love it. It's okay if you still want to lose weight. It's okay if it's hard to respect your body. But what if just for 3 or 6 months you let yourself not diet? And in the beginning, it's super scary. I think it's exciting, but also terrifying at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so just honoring that that's normal. And I have a blog post actually that's like kind of talks about that. And it's juliedillonrd.com/scary hunger, I I believe
Oh,
is that
okay.
yeah. So if you're wanting to know kind of some first steps, that's a good one to kind of, because it's really just trying to reestablish kind of a barometer. Because when we're on autopilot with diets, we're following a list, or this is when you eat, this is when you don't eat, and you take that away. Um, it's really normal to be like, well, then now what? What do I do
Mm-hmm.
now? And that's so scary. And what Evelyn Tribbley, I remember learning from her, was that doing some barometer work where you just schedule a few times a day, every couple hours, where you just intentionally pause and ask yourself, what do I need right now? Am I tired? Do I need to pee? Am I hungry? Am I cold?
Uh-huh.
And really, I feel like it's a mindfulness technique that just, and that little step sounds like nothing, but I see it opening up so much, like synapses in the brain, and it helps
Mm-hmm.
with just helping the brain to reconnect to the body.
Mm-hmm.
And that I feel like allows for more. And then if someone, because they're listening to this podcast, listening to more podcasts with that conversation, my podcast is called Love Food, and I intentionally wanted people who are experiencing that diet culture and trying to find a way out to be the driver of the content. And so what I have people do is they write a letter to food, and Nicole helped me answer one of these letters once. And
Mm-hmm.
and so, but just listening through the letters and hearing other people experiencing the same thing. And what I try to do then is give some 10 or 15 minutes of um, possible solutions, things that have helped other people, things to try, and
Very
to
practical.
I hope it is. That's what it tries to be. And I feel like it's okay to kind of be in a place of like on deck with it and just listening for a while until it's the right time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this, what you're doing and changing this whole narrative, the whole conversation about weight is so important. And, my experience seeing clients is just life changing, that they have now more energy to do things they use their talents differently. There's all this more space to
Mm-hmm.
say, well, do I want to travel? Do I want to make stuff? Do I want, it's like giving them their life back.
Right. People talk about their biggest complaint is like food has too much power. Like I'm always thinking about it. I don't want to think about it any more than I have to. And
Mm-hmm.
doing this type of work, it does. It opens up the space so they can find themselves again, and connect to like their joy and relationships and spirituality, connecting to things that
Mm-hmm.
matter to them. And
Mm-hmm.
that is exactly what I want.
That's lovely. Thank you so much for the work you do, Julie. And you're just you're like a powerhouse. I can feel your passion, and I follow you, and you get really riled up. And it's like Evelyn Tribbley too. As I said to her, you watch her talk, and it's almost like a religious experience. She's just talks in such, she gets so animated and she's so into it, and it's a real pleasure. But I really appreciate all your work, and how much you help people, and I think that the way you explained it today is very clear, and I'm hoping that our listeners can to understand it, and to try a new way to be with food. Like there's a whole new world out there, that you don't have to be tortured, which is, I think, a word that you use. You don't have to be tortured.
Mm-hmm.
There's other
Right.
options.
Right. Yeah. It's not, you don't need to keep trying to fix yourself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's such a profound message. Thank you so much for sharing that with us today.
Thank you, Nicole. It was my pleasure and it was great to connect.
Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. I love to hear from my listeners, so send me an email at NicoleChristina.com and tell me what you'd like to hear more about. I would also greatly appreciate if you could hop on iTunes and rate the show. Ratings help other people find the podcast so I can share all these good, juicy interviews with others. I would also invite you to become a patron of the Zestful Aging podcast. Hop on over to patreon.com/Zestful Aging and consider making a small donation. You will be eligible for insider-only goodies and behind-the-scenes information, and it'll help you feel good knowing that you're contributing to the Zestful Aging podcast. I'll look forward to sharing more juicy interviews next week on Zestful Aging.